last day of the conference. It's Sunday, and I'm really glad that you guys all came out. So first, I'm just gonna introduce myself. I'm Rose Deraz, Rose Mustafa Grez. I'm a proud Muslim Egyptian woman from Philly, and I've been involved with activism for about 5 years. And I just want to first state how honored I am to be moderating this panel with such a great, diverse group of activists that are doing so much change in the community. Because we need to understand how important solidarity is, because one cause can't be liberated without the other, and that's why we're all here. Because I understand that my struggle can't be liberated without the black struggle. My Palestinian struggle can't be liberated without the black struggle. The black struggle can't be liberated without the Palestinian struggle. Same thing with the women's struggle. So that I just really wanted to emphasize on that, and that's why we're here, and that's why activism is so important. Because when you connect the dots, that's when change will happen. That's literally when change will happen. So that, and with that, I just wanted to introduce our guest then. Hey, Wafat. So this is Wafat Diaz. She's one of the main political significant influences in my life. When I came to Temple, she told me, she got me into activism, because I already knew about injustices growing up, because, growing up as Muslim and Egyptian in America isn't that easy. So with that, I'm going to introduce Wafat. She is born and raised in Philly and has been involved in activism since middle school. In middle school and high school, she would attend several anti-war rallies on Iraq, Afghanistan, and Palestine. By the time she got to Temple, she was proud to be the president of Students for Justice in Palestine. She was also worked very closely with Philadelphia-based groups, Philly BDS, Jews for a Just Peace, and much more. She's a passionate activist committed to international justice and equality everywhere. So if we could give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Rose. First, I want to say thank you to everyone who's organized the conference. It's definitely a huge compliment, I feel, to be speaking with everyone and to be speaking, especially after Angela Davis and Dr. Montero and Dr. Cornell West and everyone else. So it's thank you for choosing me, Rose, and thank you, really. So I'm just gonna start. I've kind of, although at Students for Justice in Palestine, there were so many things that happened. But in my speech, I'm gonna kind of focus on a lot of different things, and then in the Q&A, we can focus more on Students for Justice in Palestine, specifically. So growing up as an Arab American Muslim in the U.S. post 9/11. It was really hard not to ignore the very loaded headlines and reports portraying every single Muslim as a terrorist. So, being Muslim is political. Your very presence makes people feel uncomfortable, and media outlets make sure you feel that way in society. So at a young age, I was forced to understand and learn about the politics that controlled, and I say still control, my life. And this is why in the 8th grade, my senior exit project was an analysis of every war that ever happened. And I even brought, I even brought in an anti-war activist to speak about the war in Iraq. And throughout high school, I attended protests, such as the one against the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 2006. So as you can imagine, by the time I was a freshman at Temple University, I joined Students for Justice in Palestine, and by the time I was a sophomore, I was the president. So a part of this organization, we hosted many events, and we featured several human rights activists, journalists, political scientists. Our speakers included Ali Abu Nima, Susan Abu Hawa, Ahmed Moore, Max Blumenthal, Layla Al-Haddad, Norman Finkelstein, among several others. And I mentioned Norman Finkelstein last because when we had him there were a lot of professors here at Temple and a lot of Zionist organizations within Philadelphia who were against him speaking here at Temple. They were against him speaking because both his father and mother survived the Holocaust, and instead of supporting Israel, just as they would like him to, he chooses to speak out against the Israeli apartheid of occupied Palestine. And it's after this event that myself and several SJP members met Dr. Montero. And, and he's just been such an amazing mentor. And he's allowed us, I think, to understand more than ever the interconnectedness of the Black struggle in the United States and Palestinian resistance within Palestine. And that event definitely put us on the map in terms of who's who and which organization is doing stuff and which organizations aren't. Really, like everyone knew about us after that event. That was just one event, you know?
Yeah.
And we can, later in the Q&A, we can focus more about the pressure that we received from, from Temple in general and from other student orgs, or like I guess what we call the drama that, would always happen to Palestine orgs. I'll focus more on that in the Q&A. But there's also, since I'm speaking here and it's part of the Black Radical Conference, what I wanted to focus on is feelings, right? Because, and what I mean by that is, it's the challenge that that we face as organizers is the feelings of people that disagree with us, right? So, for example, anytime we try to bring up our struggles and our movements, there are white supremacists and Zionists trying to take, our space, take any, once we get to the media, they even try to take that, try to, I guess you can say hijack our movement, or,
Great word.
And so anytime that we, even as a student organization on campus, even though we had simple, we were selling cupcakes, or, even when we had apartheid demonstrations outside, we always had Zionists attempting to hijack our events, and because they kept on bringing up how hurt their feelings were, just because we were explaining the horrific conditions that Palestinians live through. And the Black Lives Matter movement also deals with white supremacists, saying that your movement, makes them feel uncomfortable. And I think it makes them uncomfortable because it directly questions their privilege and their entitlement. And it makes them uncomfortable because it directly questions opportunities they have and the ones that we lack. And it makes them uncomfortable because the rights and freedoms that they enjoy were built off, the backs of our ancestors, the blood, tears, and struggle of our ancestors. And to add to this, it's interesting because I was watching a documentary about comedians in South Africa, and there were a lot of white comedians in this documentary that didn't understand why Black South African comedians were bringing up apartheid South Africa in their comedic material. And, a lot of them were saying, apartheid ended. I don't know why they keep on bringing up apartheid. But it's if apartheid ended, then why is it that Blacks in South Africa are still living in cramped, unhygienic shanty towns? If the civil rights era has ended in the United States, then why is it that Black people still have no access to the resources that whites have within the United States? And when they do, their neighborhoods are being gentrified. Gentrified by real estate giants and universities in the city of Philadelphia, Brooklyn, and elsewhere. If the civil rights era ended, then why haven't the cops that have killed Black men, women, and children been jailed? And even though it's caught on camera, if Palestinians and Israelis signed the Oslo Accords, why are Palestinians still occupied? why do they live in Bantu stands? And why is it that Palestinian villages in the West Bank only have access to the 20% of the water that Israelis have access to? Israelis have 80% of that water. Okay, so white supremacists and Zionists assume that we all live in a free society, right? They don't understand why we complain or why we bring this up, why we bring our struggles up. And white supremacists and Zionists have thrown us a crumb, and they expect us to share. And unfortunately, I feel like we fought over it, that crumb, for many years, and they're angry that now we want access, to the full cookie. We don't, we're not focused on the crumb anymore. And I think that's what's happening, because there's been a lot of powerful protests here in the U.S. And if you've been keeping up with the news in Palestine, Israel, there's been many uprisings and a lot of killings. So, I mean, at the same time, they're kind of exploding, both movements, I would say. So before I kind of end, I also wanted to bring up a famous name that we haven't really mentioned this weekend, and it's Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon mentioned the inferiority complex and the psychological damage that we have resulting from centuries of colonization, and how we have to decolonize our minds. And as a young activist, I see this all the time throughout the Middle East, here in America, and it includes a lot of self-loathing, it includes a lot of self-hatred, and a lot of accepting and wanting to be like our oppressors, unfortunately. And I personally, I truly believe that the only way that we have, the only way that we can fully accomplish our goals, and I truly believe that the only way that, I truly believe that only when we have fully decolonized our minds, and once we officially stop self-loathing, that we are, that we were unwillingly born and raised to accept, once we break those chains in our minds, once we do this, then we will confidently be closer to the true, real, and long overdue justice that we really deserve. And myself included, because as a Palestinian, I've struggled with this for so long. And I mean, even on campus, a lot of things would happen, and I would get cursed out by Zionists, and they would call me really nasty names, and I would be hesitant to even report that. Because part of this movement, we dehumanize ourselves. We're like, well, what if I deserve that? Or what if no one will care? Or what if they'll think I started it? So I think once we do, and Fanon has he's just an amazing person, he deserves a panel alone, but I feel inspired by him, and I think that we're on a really good path, and I'm really excited for that. So, there are a lot more points that I also wanted to make on Islamophobia and xenophobia, but I hope to focus more on that in the Q&A. Right now, I would actually like to show a video created by Dr. Marie Morales Williams, Christian Davis Bailey, and Remy Kanazi. It compares the Black struggle for justice to the Black Palestinian struggle for justice. It's called When I See Them, I See Us. This video is about the Black Palestinian solidarity against state-sanctioned violence that Blacks and Palestinians face on a daily basis. And they did an amazing job on this video. It's self-explanatory, but if you want more details, you can go to BlackPalestinianSolidarity.com, and both Christian Davis Bailey and Dr. Marie have been here at the conference. I don't know if any of you saw them or got the chance to talk to them. So if you wanted to ask them any more details, you can ask them. I'm not sure how I am on time. I would have maybe prepared something longer, but I'll show the video right now.
When I see them, I see us.
Every 28 hours, a black life is stolen by police or vigilantes in the U.S.
Every 2 hours, a Palestinian child was killed in Israel's attack on Gaza last summer.
Eric Garner, 43 years old, father of 6, grandfather, friends.
Ghalia El-Ghannam, 7 years old, killed when an Israeli missile struck her home.
Hashem Abu Maryam, 45 years old, father of 4, human rights worker.
Ayanna Jones, 7 years old, killed in her sleep by Detroit police.
When I see them,
I see us. Harassed, beaten, tortured, dehumanized.
stopped and frisked, searched at checkpoints.
Administrative detention, youth incarceration.
When I see them,
I see us.
From Rikers Island to Ophir Prison.
from Rafah to Chicago.
Lives are being stolen.
Remember them.
We are not statistics. We are not collateral damage. We have names and faces.
Sakia,
Nadim,
Kimani,
Jawahir,
Renisha.
Muhammad.
they burned me alive in Jerusalem.
They gunned me down in Chicago.
they shot our water tanks in Hebron.
They cut off our water in Detroit.
They demolished our homes in the Nakba.
They swallowed our homes in New Orleans.
When I see them, I see us.
They see our rooms as dangerous, label us demographic threats. They sterilize us without our knowledge.
Mark our children as criminal.
We say no to all forms of oppression, in U.S. cities or on Palestine streets.
We respect the uniqueness of our struggles and our varied histories.
When I see them, I see us. Resilient, steadfast, determined, I see who we were meant to be.
Alive, free, liberated.
Mapping out our destiny.
I see hope.
Strength.
Love,
A place where our children can dream.
I see a road,
A partner.
A family.
A world where we can rise and be seen.
So that pretty much sums up my presentation. Again, we went through a lot of drama at Students for Justice in Palestine, so feel free to ask me about that on the panel. Thank you again. Thank you so
Okay, sorry. Okay, so our next guest is Kishara White. I'm gonna read her bio first, but Kishara White, if y'all don't know her, she is amazing, and she is one of the most badass organizers in Philadelphia. She has done so much work, and I have mad respect for her. She inspires me all the time with all her hard work and dedication. I swear. But I'm gonna read her bio. So, Kishara White is from North Philly. She's a student at Temple University who's been involved with the Montero struggle since it began. She's been involved in anti-police brutality and vigilante violence since 2013 with an organization called People's Underground for Revolutionary Progress, also known as PERP. Her work in PERP focused on political education and the establishment of survival programs. If you want to go ahead then, because she's really badass. So. Yeah.
Thanks, Rose. Well, Rose says that I'm badass, but so is she. Because she's always like the moral compass of our group. She's always like the one who's like, no, that's wrong. Because there has to be a line, and I think in general, there's a lot of nuance in the way that we like to sometimes organize things or what becomes right and wrong in these times. And so Rose is always clear.
Thank you, Shar. You're just
always so
being, thank you.
clear.
You're being nice. Thanks.
But today I wanted to really talk about explicitly the Montero struggle at Temple University. And it actually didn't start with Montero, and I think that that's really important because the political climate in North Philadelphia and at Temple in particular is really important to this particular struggle. So in 2014, some graduate students got together and they staged a protest to save Black Studies. I was a Black Studies student, and at the time I was in Montero's class. We had started a philosophy circle together along with Rose, a bunch of other students that are in here right now that I can look at and name, and just really awesome people from the community. Philadelphia chapter of the Black Panthers would stop in, Move would stop in, and we would all do philosophy together. And I thought it was the most important time for our development because we were doing something that the university, we didn't know at the time, but the university fundamentally disagreed with. And so we were just like, oh, we're doing this thing, after school or, as a study group. And we didn't know that we would be attacked for it. And so at that time, what was happening in African American studies was our teachers were being fired. Our teachers were quitting because of the work conditions. Later on, we found out that they had been asked to do things that were just unethical, and in terms of their position in the school, they were asked to stay silent on certain issues. They were asked to, not teach certain material, things like that were just academically unethical. And because of that climate, many people, they decided to leave, and that left the students without any leadership. And so Montero became that leadership. He started this philosophy circle. He initiated the free Saturday school. And among other things, he was a mentor. He invited us to his home. He was willing to meet with us in office hours about classes that he had nothing to do with, and all sorts of things. And not only did he extend this to undergraduate students, but also to graduate students. And so the graduate students got together after sending several letters to the administration, and expressing concern around the way that the chair of the College of Liberal Arts wanted us to choose a chair of the department. The chair of the department had retired at the time, and we were asked to stage a vote to, as the faculty was asked to stage a vote to determine who would be the next chair. They did that 3 different times, and each time their decision for who they voted for was denied on a basis that was still to this day undetermined. It was just, we voted for this person, no, I'm not gonna take that person. We voted for this person as a faculty, no, I'm not gonna take that person. And so their sovereignty as a faculty was not, respected or taken very seriously at all. And so when graduate students, obviously that's gonna affect their dissertation status. And so telling certain people that they can't chair dissertations on, erroneous basis or what have you, was a big problem for them. And so they started action, and they had this big protest, and it was really successful. It actually was able to mobilize most of the undergraduate students at the time who really cared about this, including myself and the students who would come together to form PERP. And just briefly, PERP is an organization that started here at Temple in North Philly because Black Studies was failing, and was failing us. And we had the philosophy circle because we didn't have the classes that we needed in order to engage the material that we wanted to engage because of the unethical treatment of Temple toward our faculty and our discipline. And also the graduate students who had worked really hard up until that point to maintain a balance between academic rhetoric and action. And it was that they urged us to do action, but there was not any action being taken place up until spring 2014. And since then, we have been struggling to revamp the department. And Dr. Montero was one of the votes. He was voted twice to chair the department. And each time the chair, the dean of the College of Liberal Arts, she said no. And each time she made the claim that it was because he wasn't tenured. And that was an issue with us because Dr. Montero was promised tenure when he first got here. He was also a tenured professor at another university before he got here. He left that university to come here to be tenured. And so when he wasn't tenured, it was because of the racist practices of the dean. And she had put her finger in the face of Dr. Asante. She had told in a meeting that, a staff meeting, that she did not see a black community when Dr. Montero asked her what the relationship between African American studies and the black community in North Philly should be. As the department chair, Dr. Montero had, or rather, as up for the position, he and Asante had they had this sort of debate. So everybody came to see the debate, but it was all a show because the dean had never intended on putting Dr. Montero as the chair. And up until then, Asante had presented himself that he didn't want to be the chair. He would say publicly that he didn't want to do it. He wrote, I think, in a paper that he didn't, he said in a couple of interviews that he didn't want to do up until then. And students like me, Rose, Sarah, Sabrina, we all got together. We had mad demonstrations, but that only radicalized us. Like, it wasn't always about the department. And the more we started talking about the problems in the department, the more bourgeois our problems became, because it was a problem of a liberal arts student. And so we wanted to begin to engage the community around the racist practices of the dean, because we knew that that was only a microcosm of the racist practices of Temple University in North Philadelphia. We started engaging all different types of people at the Church of the Advocate around gentrification and displacement, and the police brutality that came alongside that. And so, we did a lot. Like, I can't even tell you how many demonstrations we had, but I think our struggle up until this point has been around the moral problems, the moral, the whether or not Temple is acting morally on behalf of the North Philadelphia community. And I think that's where we took the wrong line. Because just because Temple isn't immoral, like, they don't care. And when you set up a structure that is meant to devour neighborhoods, meant to displace families and communities of people, you have to be, I guess as students, we had to be able to consider that because they didn't consider these people in the first place, that they didn't care whether they were acting morally on their behalf, or whether a public institution should be acting morally in and of itself. And so, fast forward to 2015, we took over a couple buildings. Okay, so what's his name? The president, Theobald. Yeah. Sakari Rose is an amazing organizer in the city, and she organizes around reproductive health with Black women in particular. She had everybody in her organization, I believe over like 500, 600 people, calling this man every single day from 8 o'clock till whenever, every day, because they would not meet with us. And this is after multiple correspondence of them giving us the runaround. So we have a rally outside of a board of trustees meeting or whatever, and then we had to Sakari Rose made us rush the building and go inside, and because she was saying that she was giving a speech, and then she kept saying that it was problematic that we were outside the building yelling at these, like, almost like the walls. Like, we should be able to, like, these people are accountable to us. We pay our taxes to go here. And so we rushed the building, we took over the board of trustees meeting, and we got our meeting with the president, and that followed other protests and other meetings with the provost and all followed as well. And in those meetings, that's when I kind of discovered that moral, that line to wonder if Temple would be right when they knew they would be wrong, that they were wrong. If we could just explain how they were wrong, then they would just do the right thing, right? No. The provost said to me, when I told him that students were worried that they didn't have control over who teaches them and what material they teach, and students were also worried that you could arbitrarily fire people without cause, when the working conditions for so many adjuncts are terrible, that you could just fire people and take their jobs away, that's a problem. And the fact that you won't tenure X, Y, and Z professor, whoever they were, at the moment, is an issue with us too. And we want answers. We pay our money to go here. We want answers. He said, well, the answer is we're just trying to hire the least tenured faculty possible. That's it. And so I think that what we get from the Montero struggle is not over. We're just in a new stage, and that's the movement across the board. I know, like, we've been talking about co-option and all this stuff this weekend, but the movement isn't over, and it hasn't been completely co-opted. We're just at a new stage, and I think that we need to be cognizant of what we do at this stage. But now we're in an ideological battle. We need to strive to sort of get students active again, because we've been really inactive in the past semester and a half or so, and bring new students into the fold because so many of us have already graduated. So what I think PERP, because we've been on hiatus for some time, what I think PERP needs to do in the future is ground ourselves in the movement of the people and not bourgeois liberalism, and move towards a stance where we're not students who are fighting for the struggles of these folks in North Philly, but we're North Philadelphians now, and we have a stake in what happens in this place. So I just wanted to thank y'all for listening to me and my little spiel on Temple, and encourage everyone that we're gonna win.
Yeah. Okay, so next up we have Niall Ford. He is a minister, organizer, and scholar based in Newark, New Jersey. Currently, Niall is a year PhD student in religion and African American studies at Princeton University. Okay, well, let's give a round of applause.
What's up, everybody? Hello. Y'all good? A little tired?
No.
I'm really happy to be here this morning. I'm really hopeful to have a critical and creative dialogue with the group. So I'm really no expert in student organizing. I really don't see myself as an expert in organizing at all. So what I'll do is, if it's okay, to tell a little of my experience It's going to have to do something with the relationship between community-based organizing and student organizing. So I want to talk a little bit about that relationship, and then tell a little bit of my own story and perhaps leave with about 3 things that I've learned along the way, if that's okay. I'm going to be talking towards the end within the context of the protests that happened this year on Princeton University's campus. So I'll start by saying that I was actually politicized and radicalized my first semester of graduate school. I went to Morehouse College for undergrad. It was not at Morehouse that I was radicalized. It was actually at Princeton Theological Seminary. It was in my first semester. I was in a required course that we had to take, and somebody by the name of Mumia Abu Jamal called into the class. We were here yesterday and had the opportunity to hear Mumia. Maybe you can feel what I'm about to say. So when I first heard Mumia's voice, I mean, he has that very baritone, right? Just voicing like captivates you, and arrested me. I was sitting in a seat just like up there, and I was like, who is this guy? I mean, you know, talking about freedom like that. I had never heard anybody talk about freedom like that, talk about a new world like that, and it was just really, really sort of one of those moments where I knew that something was going to be different. So after hearing Mumia's voice, I just learned everything about his case. I was fascinated. I said, how can someone who had been through so much, who had been on death row longer than I've been alive, talk like that, have so much compassion, and so much competence from a 6x10-foot cell, right? I just couldn't fathom it. So I began to research. Soon found myself at my first rally 2 weeks later, actually here in Philadelphia at the Constitution Center. It was 4 days after they took me off of death row. And so I just say this story to say that, you know, sometimes we have this binary between the academy and between the community, and oftentimes it's a real binary. We have to talk about it. But many of us, I know, are also radicalized right here within the academy. And so I say that to say there's a tradition within the academy, within these spaces of learning, of higher learning, where people are being radicalized, and I surely was. So fast forward, I was in, after being politicized, I was in graduate school in a master's program, and I'm the type of person that when I learn something, I gotta touch it. It's not okay for me to just read it. So I found myself working with young people at a youth prison in New Jersey. Didn't know what I was doing, just going in there, and I just wanted to work with young folk. And so we tried to write some hip-hop musical, and that was a really great experience because it allowed me to take the things that I was learning in school and begin to apply these frameworks, because I was like, okay, this is great. And many of us have this struggle, right? Like, this sounds really good. How is this going to pop off on my block? How is this going to contextualize within my family experience? So I graduated from seminary, from my master's degree, and Ferguson happened in August. And I found myself in Ferguson. And that really got me steeped into community-based organizing even more. I was like, how do I take this stuff back to Newark, to my local community? And so I was organizing in Ferguson, bringing things from Ferguson that I was learning back to Newark. At the same time, I was applying to graduate school. And so I say this story to say, I had this tense relationship, again, between the academy and the community. While I was applying to graduate school, it seemed like every other day they was killing us, right? Watching the news, it was Eric Garner, it wasn't Eric Garner, it was Felicia McBride. It was just so many names, so many stories that we begin to lose count. And I was nervous. I was like, well, I want to have time to think about this stuff, right? Because, you know, we can put out the fire, but we got to also ask, why the hell is all this shit catching on fire in the first place? And so I was nervous. I'm like, I want to be able to think about these things critically, but I also know that, like, we got stuff to do. Folks are dying right now. Like, right now, while we talk about these things, as we write our books, we come from communities, we know people, right, that are caught up in this stuff. And so I just had this really tense thing. I ended up applying and started at Princeton. And so here I am at Princeton with some community-based organizing experience, right? Really, really interested in local-based grassroots community organizing, now at Princeton University, and there had already been some organizing being done. I'm like, okay, so now I'm here, I believe in organizing wherever you find yourself. What am I gonna do here? I began to build relationships with the undergraduate students. So as a graduate student, I realized that a lot of the organizing work was actually being done by the undergraduate students and had started already a year before me. So it was important for me to not come into my space as if nobody had been already doing the work. And so that was one lesson that I learned really quickly, is that there's folks already doing things on this campus. So my job wasn't to come in and impose anything, but to see how could I contribute, how could I support what was already happening. And one of the things that was constantly on my mind, again, was how can we build a bridge between the academy and our local communities? Because it seems to be so much of a gap, not just in how we talk, but in resources, right? You go to Princeton University, whatever you need, you're gonna get. Like, you good. Like, you need some food, you're gonna get some food. You need some resources, you're gonna get some resources. You need some mental health, they got mental health. When you go to Newark, you don't got all that, right? And so, even so to say, I mean, when I was in my master's program, I'll tell a quick story. You know, I was living in public housing with my brother, and I was commuting to Princeton in my master's. And I was like, every time I go to my building in Newark, there's cops outside, you know, they ruffling up folks, they, you know, locking us up, throwing us in jail, they knocking on our doors when we have parties, all the time. But when I'm in Princeton, and it's the same drugs in Princeton, probably even more than it was in Newark, ain't no knocking on the doors, ain't no ruffling nobody's pockets. And I'm like, what's going on? So I say that to say there's this huge gap, and we all know this, between the academy oftentimes and our community. So I'm working with undergraduate students. One of the things I learned is that a lot of graduate students weren't involved, right? And a lot of it had to do with just practical reasons. As a graduate student, it's so demanding, the reading, the workload, that it can so easily become a thing to like be isolated and to live in an island. So trying to figure out how to work with undergraduate students while in my first semester was a very big challenge. But building relationships was the thing that saved me, right? So in actually being able to talk to people, not just show up at a meeting and say what y'all need or what can I do, but hey, let's go get lunch. That allowed for folks on campus to know what my struggles were, what I was going through, that, you know, I had a lot of stuff going, and so if I missed a meeting, it wasn't like hard feelings. Those relationships that were built really set the groundwork for us to do really good organizing work. And it was literally just grabbing food together, getting to know where you're from. Those kinds of things were really important. So the students have been organizing around several things. One of the things they've been organizing around was changing the name of Woodrow Wilson School. That was a huge demand that they had already been asking for. They were also asking for cultural competencies for all faculty and staff. And that was because they were having several incidents of students on campus, most of whom were black, but also other students of color, who had just experienced either microaggressions or macroaggressions of institutionalized racism. And so they were asking for cultural competency. And then lastly, they were asking for a building for black students. So Princeton University at one point had a third world building, and that was for people from all kinds of oppressed communities, marginalized communities, but the third world building no longer exists, and they essentially opened up this building that's pretty far away from campus to let black folks, but it's not just black students, it's other communities like have that space. It was an afterthought. And so they're saying, no, we want a space for ourselves that we can be able to study together. We could be able to do political education together. We could be able to eat together. Very practical things. So they're like, how do we begin to push our demands? Now, the beauty of where we're here, the Black radical tradition, is that we don't have to always come up with something new. So as we know, if you know a little bit of the history of Black studies itself, it arose out of, it was birthed through struggle right here on campuses and people shutting down buildings. So they decided to shut down Nassau Hall, which also was where the president's office was. And originally, they didn't know like it was about to be a whole thing, like a whole occupation thing. Honestly, they had met, they were mad, they wanted to do something about it. They wrote up their demands, and they said like the time is now. And I really want to point out that that was, I thought, a beautiful thing, that they were able to move on their feet. And oftentimes in organizing spaces, yes, we meet, yes, we get together, but some things have to sort of happen organically. And that week, it was just in the air. And Missouri was popping off, all these schools were popping off, and it was like, well, we can't just keep like making sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed. We finna like just go up in this building and occupy and see what happens. So that's what happened. About 19 or so undergraduate students occupied, and because of the relationships I had built, I was able to occupy it as well. I was one of the only graduate students who was in there, and I'm privileged to have been able to see that experience. So we were in there for about 33 hours. And that was rough, because some of the people started smelling a little bit. See, that's the type of organizing we're talking about. I'm an insoon, but there was about 3 lessons that I learned in this whole experience.
What happened? How did it?
Okay, I'm gonna let you know. Thank you. I love community. Make sure you get it done.
What happened? Finish the story.
I got you. So I'm gonna try to tell it in the lessons that I learned. All right. Make sure I get it right. All right. So matter of fact, let me just get to that. So essentially, the president was jobbing. You know how they do. Okay, well, I know you've been asking for these things for quite some time. We've had the conversations. We've been doing a lot better when it comes to communication. I mean, we hear you. We feel you. We know it's hard. We're doing all we can. These were the things that we've been hearing. It's like a broken record, right, on the soundtrack of student-based organizing. And when you're dealing with the powers that be. So we had heard this before. So we said, okay, the undergraduates said, okay, well, that's cool, but we heard that same thing last year. So this is what we finna do. We're gonna sit in your office until you meet our demands. And so that put a certain kind of pressure on the administration to respond. They continue to jive. All right, well, what we'll do is we will talk about your demands in serious ways if you guys just leave my office. No, President Ali. Like, let me say it again. You need to meet our demands, or we're gonna stay in your office until you meet these demands. So it was back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, what happened after 30 some odd hours was that they capitulated some. So they said, look, here's what the president can actually do. And I learned that, this is one of the lessons I learned, is that the powers that be have a way of talking and hiding themselves to say, well, when they really want to get something done, it seems like anything can get done. But when you're pressuring them to do something, then it's like, well, I don't know, I don't have the power to do that, but it's really the board that does that. You got to send a letter here to do that, and they give you all this runaround. When we know that when they really want to push something, that they can do it. So that was what was happening. Essentially, the president said, I can only do A, B, C, and D. So, and that none of those were the actual demands. All the president said he could do was take them to the board, advocate for them, and that was the best that we could get. So the truth of the story at Princeton is that the president signed a piece of paper saying that he would advocate for these demands, but there was also another stipulation that the board themselves would also sign on to it so long as they had something to do with it. But this language gets so obscure because the something to do with it can turn into actually writing the entire, let's say, cultural competency curriculum. And so that's essentially what happened. There was a paper that was signed saying that they would do something. But none of the demands have been met thus far. And so I don't want to sit here and tell a gospel that's not existing. A lot of organizing work becomes very difficult. And it becomes a matter of going back to the table when you lose or when you gain a little bit and go back. So quickly, and I'm talking too long, the lessons that I learned real quick. One, I learned this lesson about the relationship between symbolism and substance. Symbolism and substance. So again, at Princeton, one of the major demands or most popular demands was change the name of the Woodrow Wilson School. We know he was a white supremacist. We know he was a racist. We know he resegregated the federal government. We know, right? We know the history. We know the story they tell. We know the true story. And so it was change the name of the Woodrow Wilson School. There's black students who have to take degrees that have his name on it. That's an act of violence. These are the kinds of things that students were saying. One of the conversations that I thought was very important was, is it enough to change the name of the Woodrow Wilson School if the nature of the school doesn't change? So there's becoming this question about names and nature, right? We can window dress, we can change the furniture around in the room, but all of it is still in there. And so that was a big debate, and that was something that I learned, that it's not simply enough to go around and change the clothes when the body is still the same. If the body smells, you can change the clothes over and over. If you ain't take a shower, it's going to still stay. So we need the school to take a shower, not simply to put on different clothes. That's one thing. The other thing I learned was student movements, and this is my politics, right? So this isn't everybody's politics, but this was a point of debate, but this is my politics. Student movements are best when they centralize service workers and local communities. They're best when they centralize service workers and local communities. So at Princeton, the students were doing amazing organizing work, but one thing that I think was missing, and there were reasons for this, right, which I don't have time to tell, but reasons that were practical, reasons that were ideological that go back to before I got there. There was not enough, I think, attention towards the service workers, those who, when we go to the cafeteria, put food on the plate, those who are cleaning up in the dorms, those who are making sure that when we go in class, the class is clean. It was not enough attention on those. And to me, if we're going to practice freedom, it has to be not just in the things that we aspire for, but we can't overlook those who are right in our face as we do this work. Because especially as students, there is a hierarchy in the academy, and we're not at the bottom of that hierarchy. And I know that we experience a lot of pressures. We are still in debt, right? We have a lot of things that would cause us to overlook those who are in many ways or even underneath us in the sense of the hierarchy. And so I think that student movements are best when they centralize service workers and local communities. And the last thing is to make your demands ridiculously big. So this is my idea. When I go to buy a car, and I'm trying to get a car, and the homie's selling it for $5,000, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring my mechanic friend, and I'm gonna show up with like $3,500, $4,000 maybe. But I'm not gonna let you know I have $4,000. Mind you, I got a mechanic friend. My mechanic friend is gonna go up to the car and be like, this is wrong with the car, that's wrong with the car, the little chip right there, the engine's a little tweaky, and then I go, I'll give you $3,500 for the car. Cash, I got it right now, just take it. Now, I know the guy, or the woman, or the gender non-conforming person, is not going to sell me this car for $3,500. I know that. So I have a strategy going in. My strategy is I'm gonna lowball you, because I know you're not gonna take my first offer, right? And so what do we do? We begin to negotiate. But you never let the person selling it set the terms. You have already set the terms of the debate by giving the first offer, right? Ridiculously low. And then what ends up happening is I'm gonna get the car maybe for $4,000. Maybe not the original offer $35,000, but I got it for $4,000. To me, demands are similar to that. If we make our demands in ways that are not radically gonna transform the actual nature of the institution, then we're never gonna radically transform the nature of the institution. We have to push our demands knowing that when most times, the first time we ask for them, it's not gonna be met. So, for example, it's not enough, in my opinion, to say we want cultural competency. Because they say, okay, sure, cultural competency. Write up the cultural competency curriculum. It has nothing to do with stopping racism, it has nothing to do with challenging capitalism, it has nothing to do with talking about misogyny and homophobia and queerphobia, and they just begin to co-opt our very language that we were originally trying to make a change on campus. So that's number one. I think we have to make radical demands that challenge the very nature of the institution and not just the names of buildings. So I'm excited to have this conversation. Thank you.
So next up we have Wei Chen, who's a Civic Engagement Coordinator at Asian Americans United in Philadelphia. Wei has years of work as a youth leader and organizer. In 2003, he was one of the youth leaders of the South Philly High School student organizing.
Thank you. It's hard to continue after you. Again, my name is Wei Chen, and I work with Asian American United, the Chinese Youth Organizing Project. And the background around me, how I became a youth organizer was when I was a youth immigrant student. When I came to the United States at age of 16, and I went to school of South Philadelphia High School. And in that time, I don't speak any of English. And first month of my experience was 2 punches from the behind. That was my first welcome to the United States. And then, as soon as the school did not do anything to change and to cover the case. And then, more than more, I see more of my classmates and my schoolmate got beat up. Then I will recognize there's a long history of the school have a violent issue that allow young people to hitting each other. So 2009, 26 Asian students were beat up in the school, and 13 of them sent hospital for medical treatment. And we will negotiate with the school and tell school to change the policy, to change to come out with a safety strategy about the school safety environment. And there wasn't a lot of change. Same like you, they say a lot of fancy word about, oh, we're gonna do that, we're gonna change that, and there's nothing happened after they promise. And then we figure out, say, well, if you're not doing anything, then we're going to do something by our own. So Chinese students in the school and the Vietnamese students in the school start to organize with each other. Say, let's not go back to school since the school is not safe. Also, the school is not doing anything. We feel dangerous to going back to school environment. So we decided to boycott school. We didn't go to school for 8 days, and we're meeting to talk about the issue in the school. That was the first time that we can in the space to talk about our immigrant experience. We don't speak English. There wasn't a lot of space for us to talk about how we feel as an immigrant student in the school. How much that we receive, how much bullying that we receive. Almost all of them experienced the harassment and the violence in the school. And there were not a place for them to talk about it. Since then, we recognize we are Asian, not just Chinese and Vietnamese anymore. Because a lot of time, we got attacked because they assume we are Chinese. They assume we are Vietnamese. So during the boycott, so students start talking about the story. The story is really powerful and really move people to go to the next level and to move them to have a more anger. So the anger became a power, became an energy to move us to continue to fight the right in the school. During the process, it's hard to image, the whole process was dealing with the three languages, Chinese Mandarin, Vietnamese, and English. Every single time, every single person talking have to translate in three languages. It was fun. It was fun. It take a lot of time, and it need a lot of the patience and the passion of the work we're doing during the boycott. We protest in the school district, and there was a lot of fancy response. And we asked the superintendent and principal to meet with us, to come to our community to meet with us, and they rejected. They said, no, you're my student. You have to go back to school, and then we'll meet with you. And we know there wasn't a strategy. Once we're going back to school, it's hard to going out again. Yeah. So we reject, and we list a whole bunch of things that we need for us to going back to the school. And none of them accept those requirements. And until 8 days of a boycott, and until we host many of a press conference, until there's many of a community member from the black community to support us, and they agreed to meet with us in the outside of the school. And we asked them to complete all those requirements. Same time we filed the complaint with the Department of Justice and Human Relations Commission of Pennsylvania, and we win the lawsuit. And there was a huge moment to make immigrant students feel that we have a power to make a change, even we don't speak English in this land. The experience of my high school, it politicized me a lot to continue doing work with young people in the community. First, there's a couple of reasons. Oh, I work with many, mostly high school students, not college. Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. First, I think my high school experience is enough to talk about and to share with them about their experience, to connect with their experience. Second, if I continue working with Southfield High School, that was individual case. What about other school, the Furnace High School, other Southfield area, Philadelphia area, right? I moved out to the school. And the third reason is, I'm the college dropout. I wasn't access to the school, I dropped out of college because my English wasn't ability to go to a higher level of education. Because the situation that I faced in the high school environment. So I started working and collaborating with my mentor, and we started this youth group called Chinese Youth Organizing Project. And this is a project that students from all around the school and Chinese Mandarin speaking, they will be able to feel comfortable in the space and comfortable in the physical space and mentally space to talk about their struggle and their thinking in the place. So we create the program, and we meet every Friday to talk about how they feel in school. We meet every Friday to learn about the different other community struggle. We meet every Friday to talk about how can we do to collaborate with other community and other community youth to change the environment, to change the issues that we have now. And we also have the other leadership group, and they take more leadership to meeting with other group people, like those people meet out on the back here. So that was significant for me. That was hard for me to change to process from student victim to a student leader, to a youth organizer. Because for many of you may not know, in Chinese family or in Asian family, it wasn't easy, or Eastern Asian maybe. But it wasn't easy for us because the culture that we came from wasn't allow us to make noise. The culture, the history background that we from is not allow us to make a weave. Yes. Because we're the society tell us, no, that's not right. If you're needing that, you got shut down. So there's a whole bunch of work that we have to do with, we have a more work to do with an immigrant student in the community. But there's a lot of experience that I learned as a youth organizer, which the passion was a big one. And the second one is, you're gonna be a role model. Because whatever you do, they're going to assume this is whatever you do, they will assume this is the right thing to do. Just like a Southfield High School. When we in the Southfield High School, even some of the staff make fun of Asian students. Right? Are you Bruce Lee? They make fun of Asian accents. Right? They make other students feel that it's right to make them fun with the Asian students because they are adult, they are educated, they can do that in the school. Why he cannot? Right? This is not just about the Southfield High School. This is the whole education system that we're in today. Right? The irresponsible education system today. Right? So you have to be a role model. In Southfield High School case, it's not really about who be whom. It's not just about a black student be Asian student or white student be Asian. It's not about who be whom. It's about who let this happen in our school. I think the other thing in my organizing experience is not just be a role model. Role model is not enough. Sometimes you have to be a strong role model, which you show them what to do, and you leading them what to do. The criticism and self-criticism are really significant. We take a long time to make our youth leaders feel comfortable to criticize themselves and make them feel comfortable to criticize myself as a leader of the program and the staff of the program, because all of us make mistakes. And this is a way, I don't know about all of you, but I studied some of the models, writing. And I recognized that was really interesting what he talked about, which which also the revolutionary Grace Lee Bob was mentioned. in order to change the world, you have to change yourself first to change the world. So this is I'm more specifically in logistics because in my daily life I deal a lot with students. So it's more my daily logistics stuff. And then I think you have to create a strong inside group. I strongly believe that intergenerational organizing are hugely important for us, for our community. Because like this conference, I've been seeing a lot of I'm not saying only, but the organizers have a lot of experience, been showing a lot of story about their experience in the past. So our generation people can adopt the spirits and the culture from them. Then we continue fighting in the next generation, and we pass to the next generation. And the last thing I think is really important is thinking, which could be like studying and speaking, and also the practicing. So we have to practice a lot, not just talking and thinking, because talking and thinking are really good. Studying are really good. Until we're practicing, we won't find out a new problem in our generation, right? So that's all my tip for my experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Magna Chandra. She's an organizer in Philadelphia. She organized with student worker movements with Penn Student Labor Action Project, Occupy Philly, and is a member of the Black Radical Organizing Collective. She also founded the Philly South Asian Collective, a group of South Asian organizers dedicated to fighting Islamophobia, Hindu fundamentalism, casteism, did I say that right?
Casteism.
Oh my bad. Casteism and white supremacist capitalism, and building across brown and black communities. She hopes to be a teacher and writer.
Just wanted to say thank you to Wei Chen, who's an organizer I really love and respect, and Asian Americans United. I went to their Mid-Autumn Festival and I was a volunteer there a few months ago, and that to me is like the kind of world we want to build. Just the pride and the celebration and just the beauty of it. So just thank you so much, and thank you so much to the youth for being here. We're really honored to have you with us. So I'm going to speak a little bit about my experience organizing in India in solidarity with Ferguson. And I'm going to start with a chant that my comrades in India came up with. It's in Hindi and I'll translate. Ferguson se aaye pukar, nasalvad pe pattar maar. It means a cry comes from Ferguson. It strikes a blow at racism. So on November 24th, when Darren Wilson was acquitted for the murder of Mike Brown, and a people's movement erupted across the United States. I was in India studying at Jawaharlal Nehru University, getting my master's in history. And I was there because I think as a student and as a leftist and as an Indian American, it's really important to know your history and to know the historical forces that have made you, so you can then go on to make history. Because that's what we're in the business of doing, as leftists. So when Darren Wilson was acquitted for the murder and all these protests started, we knew that we had to do something to show our solidarity. So we started organizing protests in solidarity with Ferguson, both a protest on the campus and a march to the embassy. And in the process of organizing it with the communist student groups, with the Dalit student groups, we came to understand that India and the United States actually have a lot in common. They both call themselves great democracies, and that's how they sell themselves to the world and to other countries. They both have wholeheartedly embraced neoliberal reforms and trickle-down economics, and they think that's what's going to solve poverty. Yeah, right. They're both imperialist powers. They violently occupy territories from Afghanistan to Kashmir in the name of bringing them secular governments. They both dispossessed poor and oppressed minorities, caste, religious, ethnic, tribal, or Adivasis as they're known. They both dispossess them to make way for corporations to come and steal resources and dispossess people. They both persecute Muslims. In the current Prime Minister of India, now his name is Narendra Modi, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he oversaw pogroms against Muslims in which over 2,000 innocent men, women, and children died and were murdered in communal riots. They both have caste systems. Both India and the United States both have caste systems. And nobody understands this more than the Dalits of India. And Dalit literally means broken or oppressed people. And that's a political name that they've chosen because they refuse the caste names that their oppressors have given them. And they refuse the title untouchables, which is what people call them, or the title Harijan, which means children of God, which was the title given to them by Gandhi, who I'm going to speak a little bit about. Basically, Gandhi is not the name we want associated with the Black radical tradition, and I'll explain a little bit more why. So every week, 13 Dalits are murdered, 5 Dalit homes are burnt, and 21 Dalit women are raped. And these statistics are widely, probably extremely underreported. Both powers, they have the same means of repression. They have the same water cannons. We saw these huge water cannons when we protested, and we realized these are the same things we've seen in Ferguson. These are the same things we've seen in Baltimore. So the ruling classes have been able to globalize repression. The same riot gears and the same methods of surveillance. But we also learned in the process of organizing these protests that people's struggles in the two countries are also connected, and they've been connected for a long time, for decades. We learned that the names and the traditions of the Black radical tradition are known in India. When we were organizing these protests, we were standing on a foundation of third world solidarity and student internationalism, put forward by people like Angela Davis, Malcolm X, Huey Newton, Yuri Kochiyama, Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois. Indian students voraciously read these thinkers. Indian students read a lot, actually. I want to say that I think something I've realized being a student in both contexts is that we do not read enough in the United States. And I mean, there's this whole, maybe it's elite to read or something like that, but I think that's just a product of American anti-intellectualism. And going to India really helped me understand that. So these Indian students, they read the Black radical tradition. They know these thinkers because they understand that the Black radical tradition is key to understanding how to tear down empire from within the belly of the beast. And as I've shown, India and the US are both empires. And nobody understands this better than the Black radical tradition. So as we were organizing the protests and when we were going to the embassy, the American embassy, you're actually not allowed to protest there, but we said, this is our right to protest there. You can't stop us. They kept trying to dump us off at Jantar Mantar, which is it's like nobody is there. It's totally hidden, nobody can see it. And we said, no, we want to be in front of the embassy because we want to be directly confronting power, and this is our right. There's actually an ordinance in Delhi that, with the new neoliberal reforms, you're not allowed to protest anywhere in the city except for Jantar Mantar. And we said, screw that, we're going to go to the heart of where the power actually is. But along the way, we were stopped 5 times by the police. At every point, we blocked highways. Indian students are so militant, they're so brave, and we made sure that we got there. And we were threatened with water cannons, as I said, lati charges. So a lati is it's like a big stick that they beat you with. So they were all lined up with those sticks, and luckily we escaped beatings because I think we had a few white people with us. I think there's still, the effects of colonialism. People are still afraid to go up against them. But all the while, Indian students were chanting things like Malcolm, Martin, Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh was an Indian revolutionary. Malcolm, Martin, Bhagat Singh, we shall fight, we shall win. They were saying, Eric Garner, Zindabad. Zindabad means long live. Eric Garner, Zindabad. Michael Brown Zindabad, Renisha McBride Zindabad. And we realized in the process of organizing these protests, because I think at the beginning I don't think our analysis was that developed. I don't think we really understood what we were doing. We just had this emotional reaction to seeing our friends and our loved ones being beat up in the States. We just wanted to do something. But we realized that in the process of organizing, the reason that this resonated with Indian students so much is because the Black radical tradition and the Black Lives Matter movement is really a global movement of the oppressed against neoliberal capitalism. And that is something that the Indian students, the revolutionary Indian students, that's a struggle that they're waging every day. So the Dalit students, the Birsa Ambedkar Phule Association, the Dalit Students Association, they came out in full force. We didn't even reach out to them. We didn't know what we were doing. But they came out to us, hearing what we were doing, and they were saying, we want to speak, because there's so many connections between caste and race. It's the same kind of graduated system of hierarchy. And there's so many parallels between white supremacy in the United States and Brahmanism, Brahminical Hinduism in India. And Brahmins are at the top of the caste system and very grossly overrepresented in the diaspora. And I can go on and on about that, but really, it's the Dalit tradition is the locus of so much revolutionary fire in India. So they came out in full force for the Black radical tradition. They came out in full force for Black Lives Matter. They spoke about the Dalit Panthers, who were formed in like the 1970s. They were taking from the Black Panthers. They were inspired by the Black Panthers and the militant anti-reformism of the Black Panthers and the unwillingness to compromise with Brahmanism or with oppressive structures. They talked about the correspondence between W.E.B. Du Bois and B.R. Ambedkar. And Ambedkar, he's a towering figure that it's very sad that more of us don't know him in the United States. We know Gandhi, unfortunately, but we don't know Ambedkar. And Ambedkar, he was the leader of the anti-caste movement and the theorist and this incredible philosopher. He was one of the first Dalits to actually come outside, and he studied in Columbia University, so he also understood internationalism. He was living in Harlem, always in direct contact with the poor and dispossessed Black communities there. He was making all these connections, and he's also the author of India's constitution, so there's a lot of really interesting contradictions with Ambedkar. But he's an amazing figure. He's a towering figure. And he actually corresponded with W.E.B. Du Bois in, I don't remember exactly when, I should know the dates, but in the 1920s, they were writing letters to each other talking about the ways that the struggles are similar, strategies for combating racism on a global scale. And yeah, so the Dalit students talked about all this. They came out in full force. And over the process of organizing, as I said, when we started, we really didn't have that much of an idea of what we were doing. But I realized that the revolutionary students' job is to draw connections globally between empire and domestic terrorism, and to draw upon the history of our movement ancestors, like Huey Newton, like Angela Davis, like Paul Robeson, because that's our history, and that's the historical line that we're continuing. And so the unofficial motto of JNU, we joke it's called Jawaharlal Nehru University, named after the Prime Minister of India, but we say it should really be called Karl Marx University. And so the motto of the university is that we have, that's painted all over the murals, all over the campus, is study and struggle. So I'm just going to end with a chant that we use in India in the spirit of international solidarity that I would like to teach all of you. And it means long live the revolution. So I think it's something that all of you will really like. So when I say Inkilab Zindabad, you say Zindabad, Zindabad. Zindabad means long live. So Inkilab Zindabad!
Zindabad! Zindabad!
Inkilab Zindabad!
Zindabad! Zindabad!
Thank you.
So our final speaker is Tiara Mitchell. She's a junior at Temple University, a member of the National Council of Negro Women Temple University section, and an active member in 15 Now. She's organized protests as a student at the historically Black Delaware State University and has been involved with several Black Lives Matter movements. A public speaker, poet, singer, and songwriter. Her goal is to raise awareness to the youth of her generation to motivate and engage them in their communities. Let's give a applause for Tiara Mitchell.
Thank you. Hi everyone. How's it going?
Good.
I just feel so blessed to be here this morning. Thank you to the Black Radical Tradition for having me. I'm delighted to be sitting on this panel with such prosperous and passionate students and peers. So I just feel so blessed. I want to take a moment to shift the energy in the atmosphere. So I just want everyone to just take a hand, any hand, your right or left hand, pick a hand. And I want you to clench it tight. Clench your fist and grab it tight. Hold it so tight as if you were holding on to your last breath and you don't want to let it go. And I want you to raise it into the air, right? So now I just want to take a moment of silence to recognize any of the deaths that we've had in the past year, in the past few years, in the past 100 years, to celebrate the lives of those people that we lost due to whatever police brutalities, gun violence, whatever the case may be. So let's just take a moment of silence. Thank you. The raised fist, also known as a clenched fist, is a symbol of solidarity and unity. It's also used to salute and express strength and defiance or resistance. The salute dates back to ancient Assyria, and it's a symbol of resistance in the face of violence. So I just wanted to take a second to shift that energy and just bounce it off of each other, to recognize the things that we've been through as a people. Like Rose was saying in the beginning, my struggle may not be your struggle or the next person's struggle, but it's all struggle, it's all one and the same. It's like PB&J, it goes together. So we just need to appreciate each other. So yeah, again, I'm Tiara Mitchell. I'm currently a junior here at Temple. Before attending this university, I studied for 2 years at the historically Black Delaware State College, which is now Delaware State University. It was Delaware State College then. And while I was there, I consumed and dedicated myself to the African American studies. While I was there, I focused on the uplift and empowerment of Black young people. It's important as young people, young Black people, students, period, to come together and recognize these real world issues, things that we are facing every day. It's sad to see, on social media how a lot of the things are portrayed, and the violence and the nudity and all of these things that brainwash our youth, and they give us these visuals of things that blind us and brainwash us, and it kind of steers us in the wrong direction. But we need to come together and focus and fight for these issues, fight for our rights. So yeah, while I was at Delaware State University, my focus was to empower and uplift the Black community. And here at Temple, I transferred to Temple. This is my first year, so it's going to be my second semester coming here to Temple. And my focus is the same. It's just a different location, being at a predominantly white institution. So being in a PWI, I know that I have to walk a little differently, carry myself a little differently when I'm in a pool of all of these fish with people that don't look like me. It looks more so like people in the audience and white faces and tan faces, and I just always want to be the best for myself and be a role model for my siblings. I'm the oldest of all my siblings. So when I came to Temple, I felt like I made a great decision coming to this university. and, you know, seeing the difference between going to a PWI and going to a HBCU. It's definitely a large difference between the two, but I always want to strive to be the best in all of my classrooms. Some of my classrooms, I'm the only person of color. Some in my classes, I'm the only person of color and woman. So having all of those struggles, it just makes me stronger as a person. I want to take a second to recognize Black women. Black women in America have learned to find horror and heartache, have seeked beauty in the midst of horror and desperation. They have been caregivers and breadwinners, showing incredible strength and resilience. So I just want to take a second to recognize women, period, and more so women of color. So yeah, here at Temple, I am a member of the nationally recognized organization, the National Council of Negro Women, Temple University section, in which our mission is to lead, develop, and advocate for women of African descent as they support their families and communities. NCNW fulfills this purpose through research, advocacy, and development in community-based services, the research on programs of issues of health, gender, education, economic empowerment in the United States and in Africa. So it's been wonderful being a part of this organization, just coming into Temple. I just wanted to jump right in, get involved as much as I could, working almost a full-time job, being a full-time student, and still being new. So I definitely wanted to go in headstrong, get involved in the organizations, and put myself out into the community. Also in doing that, I've joined Temple 15 now. You know, the story is funny. I'm just this new girl just walking, you know, through Bury Beach, and I just see this table of these people just chanting, and I'm just like, I want to see what's going on. So I just walk on over, and they're like, yeah, we're 15 now in the campaign to raise the minimum wage to $15, and I'm just like, yeah, there's a lot of poverty going on in the world. Of the 10 major cities, Philadelphia is the most impoverished. So at that moment, I just felt really empowered to do something and make a change. And after that, I just jumped right in and got involved as much as I could with 15 now. And since then, you know, I don't think I'm a different person, but I do think I'm a lot more aware of the things that are going on in the world as far as economic issues, capitalism, things in that nature. So some of the things that I've done as an active member since I've joined 15 now, well, I'll tell you a little bit about the highlights in the history. 15 now started here at Temple in October 2014, so just a short time ago. And members of Temple, before I became a member, members of the organization attempted to reach President Theobald, voicing our concerns about how Temple underpays their workers and underpays their students, the people who are a part of the North Philadelphia community. And it just doesn't make sense that Temple wouldn't pay them living wages. Every worker deserves a living wage, and I can attest to that because I got my first job when I was 16, always have had a job and have always been underpaid. And the type of person that I am, when I do something, I give 110%, 1,010%, whatever it takes. I'm pretty much used to running the show for other people, making other people proud, because that's what makes me happy. So with all of my jobs, I've always just given so much to just get back so little. You have to give and you have to get. So for Temple not to pay their workers, these people that come to school every morning and they work their butts off and they give, and the students even don't respect it. They don't acknowledge them. They don't say hello. So I pride in myself that when I'm walking down the street and I see these officers that have on their yellow and blue uniforms, I say hello. Just because a simple hello can make such a difference. Just a simple hello. There's just so many issues that we have as a people. It's not just race problems, it's people problems. And problems that I have with my own race, people that look like me, there's too many defense mechanisms, too much competition, too much, oh, I want what he has, or I don't have what she has, so now I'm going to be a hater. It put all of that to the side because we're all in this together. And as a youth, we have that concentration, get our heads back in the game because we're in it to win it at the end of the day, because these capitalists aren't giving a damn about what we're doing or where we're going to be in 10 years from now. So we have to fight for it, and we have to fight hard for it. So just to highlight some of the other things that 15 Now has done this year, we shut down the Board of Trustees meeting by first having an action over at Bury Beach where we voiced our demands, and we had different speakers about workers deserving to be paid living wages, and that's $15. Some people may ask, well, why 15? 15 is just the start. It's just the first step towards living wages. Low-wage jobs are disproportionately held by people of color, women, immigrants. So the fight for 15 is really a question of racial, gender, and social equality, and that's what we want to fight for, social equality. Shift the balance of power and shift the balance of wealth so that it's equally distributed, because I was talking to my dad, and he made a really great point, and ever since we had this conversation, I've carried this with me. It's not so much about the money that people have, it's the power behind the money to make the move. So when we're fighting, the other two panelists were saying, to speak to these board of trustees and reach out to the president, they have the money and they have the power, but we have to fight so much harder, even though we don't have the wealth, we don't have the money, but we have this and we have this. So those two together, and us, all of us together, fighting for our rights and doing what we need to do to say, hey, that's not right. I deserve living wages. I deserve for, buildings to be built for African American studies and Asian studies and Indian studies. We're all in this together, so it's just a matter of staying together, sticking together, keeping your head in the game, being headstrong. Forget about the social media, forget about the news, forget about all of the things that don't matter, these musics and the music industry. It's all brainwashing. They want to put these things in our heads to just keep us in this system of control. We need to spin out of that control and really go for it and really fight for it. So that's all I have for you guys today. Yeah.
Wow, thank you all for saying such great stories and about your experiences. I learned a lot. So now I have a few questions on my own, and then I was going to bring it to the audience. So we've been talking about how great activism is and how organizing is so wonderful, but we know that there's a lot of problems. So my first question is, what problems have you faced in organizing, and what did you do to solve them? Whoever wants to volunteer to go. Okay. Okay, can we pass it down with that?
Palestinians have to accept the two-state solution. When Palestinians accept this two-state solution, they'll still be living in the Bantu stands that they already live in, and they really wouldn't have access to the resources that they really need. So when you had people coming and saying that they were for Palestinian rights, they still were pretty entitled and privileged, and they weren't fully for Palestinian rights at all. So it was really hard dealing with that because it got really sensitive at times. I'm talking about in Philadelphia in general. I don't think we dealt with it that much in our organization. But on campus, actually, we dealt with that a lot. People would come up to us and say that they, were for Palestinian rights, but anytime you talked about Palestinian resistance, in prisons or anywhere else. And even when you talked about simple boycott, divestment, sanction of the state of Israel, that would make them feel uncomfortable. But then again, when you have Israelis, the Israeli government throwing Palestinian children in jail just for simply throwing a rock, and they're not even old enough to understand what they are doing. When you throw them in prison and don't even give them access to a lawyer, that's just so unethical on so many levels. And when you massacre over 2,000 Palestinians in one summer in about, 40 days, and then you just assume that you can just get away with it, that's just completely unacceptable. So we dealt with different people who weren't really, I say, weren't really for Palestinian rights at all, and were, trying to have their own agenda. They were trying to, again, I would say, hijack what we were trying to build, so that they can just, kind of maybe give Palestinians one or two rights, and then just really, no, really, and then say, oh yeah, we stood for Palestinian rights when they didn't at all. So, but we dealt with it by, we talked to the right people, we talked to people who were close to them, and actually some of them came to their senses, thankfully. They really did. And then for the ones who weren't genuine, they ended up just leaving. And and that's how you have a strong movement, when you weed out the fake people, I guess you can say. Because, they end up coming out. They end up revealing themselves, I would say.
I just wanted to say two things to this point. Because one thing is, I think that we forget that this is people work. And so, dealing with people is hard. That's just a difficult thing. People just have their own stuff going on in their lives, and but more so the deep, I guess, insecurities that come along with being a revolutionary or being more radical. I think, or saying that you want to make a change, because I think that's where it starts. But all those insecurities allow for a lot of problems within organizing and building relationships, because that's the most important part about organizing. And I think that, men's sexism played a huge role in problems with our organizing. I think that ageism and just hierarchical problems within and of themselves, and ultimately people like you're saying, not really wanting to be free, or rather them understanding their freedom from the context of their own personal liberation. And so if my liberation comes through my personal liberation, once black women like me can get on, then I'm chilling, right? But it's not that's not how liberation works. And I think that there's a process to being able to realize that, and people come to realizations around that over time and through struggle, because they're not going to do that any other way. You can't learn it in a book. You can't learn feminism in a book. You can't. And so that's a big thing. But then I think the other thing I wanted to say was just political education, and the almost like people just not being hit. I don't really know too many other ways to put it. It's like people don't really have a lot of the context of what's actually going on in the world, and most of their context is propaganda. And that's a huge problem in organizing when you talk about wanting to get people on your side. If the only way that people can engage the society is through the propaganda that the ruling class creates for them, it's really hard to get them on the side of anything radical or anything sort of wanting to change anything. So I think that that's really important. And one thing I think to combat both of these things is that's really, really important is culture. We have to create a culture of revolution. We have to create a culture of resistance. We have to create a culture where art and music and everything that we do, because I know Tierra was talking about on social media how we're being brainwashed. I think we need to do purging and talk about what our struggle really is through art and culture, and distinguish ourselves culturally from the ruling class.
Could you just talk more about that? You can't learn feminism from a book. Why do you say that?
Well, the reason I say that is because feminism, womanism, and all the isms are just expressions of our humanity. And our humanity has been challenged by these structures that we've created. We've literally, as humans, created structures that dehumanize us. And so, even though we can come up with rhetoric and language to discuss that, that doesn't necessarily mean we're acting on it all the time. And so, to learn feminism after you've been dehumanized, literally from birth, because we've all grown up. We were born into the system as like almost in a biblical way, like born into sin, that we have to create a new future for ourselves. So I think that all of these isms, all of these ways that we want to free ourselves, you can't learn this shit in a book. Like, you really can't. You have to learn it in the street. You have to learn it through struggle. You have to be in constant critique of yourself, of the movement, of the organizations that you're a part of. And it's not going to come from rhetoric. It's going to come from action. You have to live it every day.
Alright, so I'm not gonna be long. Alright, I'm gonna list some things because I got so many struggles. Way more struggles than successes. So I'm gonna just throw some things out there. One of my struggles was the gap between graduates and undergraduates. Like I said earlier, graduate students, particularly at Princeton, and I'm sure at certain other graduate schools, are so isolated. It's like an island. So trying to get graduate students to realize that this is our struggle too, and that we have things to fight for too. Places like Princeton, they got so much money, they capitulate you through the money. So you feel like there's not anything wrong because you're like, they giving you kind of bread, we come from nothing, you know, so you get a little money in your pocket, you can buy a little clothes so you feel good. And then you don't end up struggling because that's one of the ways that they sort of pet you. And so that was one of the struggles. Another was that schools can be so transitory. So people come in and people come out. How do you build a base in a situation that's naturally transitory? And I think one of the things that we have to do is have organizations, because people will come and go, students will drop out, folks have things, but with organizations, we can build sustainable power over time, no matter who's there, no matter what decade it is, no matter what the last trend is. So we need organizations, and so many people are doing that work. Another thing is social media. Umi Salah talked about this yesterday, so I won't go too much into it, but we organize a lot through social media. It has its benefits, but I think we need to see it as a tool. If we see it as a tool, the question becomes, what are we using it as a tool to build up? As Umi said yesterday, we can't misrepresent the hammer as the house, right? It's just simply a hammer, and so what are we using to build it up? I think one of the ways that we can combat some of the social media frenzy is by continuing to build relationships in real life in the oxygen world with people. Because sometimes when we reduce people to their avatars and their tweets and their likes and their statuses, we are not able to really build through struggle because we don't even really know each other. Right? We just know the surface level things, where you ate at, who you with, but we don't really know why you look like that at that meeting, right? So we gotta build relationships. Another thing, really quickly, is how, like at a place where I'm at, they're not giving me Fanon to read. You know what I'm saying? They're not giving me these folks to read. They're not giving the Black radical tradition as curriculum. So I gotta do all my work, right? But I also, on top of that, I'm sure a lot of people struggle with this, gotta do my other work, right? So how do you read the Black radical tradition while you got 1,000 pages to read a week on this other stuff? And how do you make connections between the two? I think independent studies are important. I think collectives of reading groups, book clubs are important. Building consciousness, even whether it's formally or informally, and that can be done, it has to be done in collectives, because political education doesn't happen on an island. You can't do political education by yourself. The Black radical tradition, I think the best of it teaches us that we have to learn together and struggle together in community. And then the last thing, real quickly, is when I was applying to graduate school, I had begun to build and organize with people in Newark, New Jersey. I did that really out of the context of saying it ain't good to be a freestyle, freelance organizer activist. Again, you can't build power alone, right? So what does it mean to be in a local community building with other people? Now, at the same time, I'm applying to graduate school. So we started a program that actually came out of Ferguson called Books and Breakfast. We started that in Newark. A group of us began to build up this program. We give out free books, and we also provide breakfast for local people in our community. So building up this program, I finally get into graduate school, and by the time and I say this to show that this isn't always we don't always succeed in what we try to do. And so I say this in an attempt to show how this stuff can constantly be a struggle of going back to figuring out how we can do it better. So my thing was, let's build up a community-based organization so that while I'm in graduate school, I'll be connected to people doing community work, local work, so that I won't be in this isolated thing. And we did a lot of amazing work. We had several books and breakfasts. We were building, we were meeting weekly, doing political education. We were reading the Black radical tradition. But as Sister said, things happen, personalities happen. Not just personalities, but we still live in capitalism, right? Folks got jobs, folks got things to do. And it didn't work out in the way that I wanted it to work, right? So by the time I started school, I then realized that Princeton has all this money that, whereas before our problem was money. We had the program, we were doing things, but we were trying to find funding. Now I'm at Princeton, I got the money, but the organization isn't being able to hold up because I'm trying to hold up how to stay in the academy while build with other people who are also very busy, right? And so I say that as, if y'all can figure this out with me, that's what's up. But it's been a real struggle of trying to figure out how, one, to get our resources from the academic communities to local communities. That takes a serious amount of effort, and it has to happen in collectives. So those are some of the things I learned. And I also learned really quickly is, I went to Amsterdam in October of this year, and I went with the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, I4, who's an anti-war organization. And I attended a conference called Decolonizing the University. And at Decolonizing the University, was at the University of Amsterdam, I really realized that, as some people mentioned, that we are in a global revolution of change. Students are not just rising up in Missouri and Yale, but students are rising up in South Africa, students are rising up at the University of Amsterdam, and they're saying some of the same things. And so I think that allowed for me to have a framework that's not bound to the confines of the nation state, right? That allows for us to see, right, these connections and these solidarities, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And so I just think that's important for us to think about too.
We have a question from the audience,
Yes. Earlier you said something about centralizing with the service worker. I couldn't say that. Explain that.
Sure. So
You could just take it off the
okay, word. So there's a hierarchy in the academy as there's a hierarchy in our communities. And I think sometimes as students, while we do have so much that we're fighting for, personally, we got debt. We are entering an economy that really, after all this debt, we don't even know we're going to get a job to be able to pay it off. And so we're entering into a very, very bleak situation, and that's not to take away from that. But what I think is important is that as we do our organizing, not to forget about those, as Jesus would call them, ministers, the least of these, right? So to speak, socially and politically, right? And so there's people, again, who are cleaning up after. There's people who are making sure that we have food. All of these people are also a part of the student organizing that. And if they're not, I think it weakens and it undermines the very kind of freedom practice that we're trying to do, right? Because freedom shouldn't just be for the students, justice shouldn't just be for the students, but it should be for everybody that's on campus, particularly those who are suffering the most. And so I think that any student-based organization, organizing, or that doesn't centralize service workers, those who are making oftentimes not enough money to feed their family. They're oftentimes working very long hours, getting to campus at 6, 7 in the morning, driving buses to 9, 10 at night, right? If we ignore the experiences and conditions of those on our campuses that are experiencing that, I think that we're not fighting for freedom in the way that the Black radical tradition teaches us. And I think any student movement that doesn't challenge capital, so it's not just, making sure that folks have a little bit more money in their pockets so they can feed their family, but it's about divesting from Israel, it's about divesting from prisons, it's about divesting from multinational companies that don't love us, so to speak, right? And so we have to challenge capital, and I think we see that, and I think the best of the organizing that we see challenges capital. It says that, there's a history of, this very campus and institution was built on the backs of our ancestors, and you are going to give us some money back. There's reparations, right? And there's plenty of student examples of that, and I think that's kind of what I saw.
I guess we could just open it up to the audience. Yeah, you can do the
hopefully this is really quick. I got actually a question directed at two of y'all. So you and you. First one would be to you actually, and it's about organizing and once you get people involved in the youth, and a lot of people are kind of ignorant to facts and what's going on and what they actually can and cannot do. And as far as you face a certain challenge of not everybody spoke English and not everybody spoke the same language, period. So how do you organize that information to make it available for everybody to understand and take home with, or how'd you do that? How'd you overcome that obstacle?
Well, I think
you want to pass the mic down?
I think there's more than one question on that. So first one is how to get people interested about the issue.
Right.
I think when we start to organizing, when we start to youth organizing, we don't start talking about the capitalism. We don't start talking about the real issue. We start to warm them up, and we start playing game. And a lot of time we make capitalism game up 1% and 99%. There's one chair. There's one person sitting 9 chairs, and there's 9 people have to fight for 1 chair. So they feel, wow, that's interesting. How we make organizing more interesting than the traditional just sitting there and class. Because they are really after school they're enough in the school, listen to you, and they were more play little game. I try to understand that. I think that make it more interesting, and you have to warm down. You can't just come in and start talking about the issue, and they will feel what is that? They don't have business. And for the information, I think this is one of the questions that I want to answer for the challenge that we have is language. And temporarily now, I only working with the Chinese immigrant students, and we have our organization working with Vietnamese immigrant students. And for language, it is a hard challenge for us, and we've been looking for different kind of resources, and there's the less language resource for us to do it. But we do reach out to the organization who have the resource. Are you from LA or something? Are you from the West?
Oh yeah, I'm from the West. I'm from LA, bro.
Okay, so there's an organization called Chinese Progressive Association, and they've been really progressive to change, to thinking more about people's needs. Which a lot of time when we do organizing, when we have a high expect for someone, make sure we provide high support. Because a lot of time in the school, our parents will school tell, oh, you're gonna do that, you're gonna do that. We don't provide enough support for them to do it. So I think this is a way that we do, exchange the information. Once we have something being translated, we also exchange with our organization. Yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully my second question applies to y'all. I don't want to take up everybody's time, I'm sorry. But my other question is, y'all had a whole lot of momentum, and that's another problem with organizations. Once they don't realize they got momentum, we can't seize it and keep the ball rolling. So how'd y'all make everybody aware that y'all got the momentum, let's keep the ball rolling? How would you do that? How'd you do that? Was y'all trying to
Can I add on to that actually? Yeah, that's a really good question. I think my question is, from my own experiences in undergrad and, now that I'm working in a high school, I think there's a lot of student turnover. So for me, my personal, I worked with, MSA, I worked with the Muslim Student Association in the beginning, and then, we worked, and then, other organizations, we worked on a lot of diversity issues at the College of New Jersey, right, and whatever. But, I think my issue was that because there's so much turnover, every 4 years or 5 years or 6 years, students graduate. So, and, there was so much organization in the 90s at the college, and, some of these programs, they still remain, but they couldn't be sustained. So, how do you keep up the sustainability in these spaces where there is student turnover? And I think that's, I couldn't figure that out.
Right. So that's a great question. I think that the thing is, like you said, Niall made a great point, and he, of permanent, we need to make permanent organizations that kind of, in the local community, that help the student organizations, because the students, come in and out, and some are in-state, out-of-state, international, they won't always be there. So he made a great point. Even while I was at Temple, I would always be like, why don't we have a Palestine Center? So there's a Palestine Center in Washington, D.C., and they host a lot of great events, and from what I know is that they have a close relationship with the Students for Justice in Palestine groups there, and a lot of people actually intern there. So I felt like that is a really great base for them. I really wish that we had that in Philly. What me and a lot of people graduating try to do is we had a whole database of Word documents, and even how to email a speaker, how to make reservations, how to get your flyer qualified to be all over campus, and from the most basic to the most great harder parts of organizing. We put that all in one document and said, this is for you. Okay. And we've made PowerPoints and everything, but then again, it's also who's leading and do they have the same passion you had. And I think, what he said, though, having those permanent organizations would be better, because I know even New York has a lot of Arab-based Palestine organizations that are really awesome, that college students, get a lot of resources from them. So I think we need that in Philly for every movement, really.
Okay, you in the full glasses?
I have a question. So, my question is actually about unity. First of all, I would like to know what the panel thinks the principles of unity are, to start, and then also how do you maintain those principles without losing or ignoring Black liberation? Because we talk about our ancestors, but in this space, I'm not sure if you're talking about my ancestors or if you're talking about Palestinian ancestors or the other solidarity groups that are around us. So how do you maintain that unity without ignoring the Black agenda, and what do you define as the principles of unity?
Okay, so yeah, thank you for your question. One of life's most persistent and urgent questions is, what are you doing for others? And Dr. King left us with those prominent words, and you just have to sink that in and really ask yourself, what are you doing for others? And that's where unity comes in. Sometimes we get so in tune with ourselves and what we're doing and our own personal agendas and how does my hair look today, and what just a million of things that you put yourself first and you don't think about what your neighbor is doing or what the next person is doing. So unity is coming together, putting aside your differences, taking yourself out of your own equation and putting yourself in someone else's equation. And that's how you get the equal, and that's how you get the answer, right? So unity to me is that it's like math. You put 2 and 2 together and you get an equal sign and you get the answer, and that's unity, that's coming together. And dealing with issues as far as being a person of color, as opposed to a person who is not, how do you put those differences aside to come together? It's just something that you have to do mentally and within yourself. And I feel like African American people have this defense mechanism, and they feel inferior to, you know, white people or white supremacy, but you can't have that mindset, although it's been ingrained in people for so long, and it's hard not to have that perspective and think that way. It's just something that needs to be worked on and practiced, like the other gentleman was saying on the panel earlier. You have to practice it, and that's how you come together and create unity. I don't know if I answered your question 100%, but it's a shot back together.
I mean, I also think there's a really important difference between appropriation and solidarity, and I think that's a difference we have to maintain, because if we're always so worried about appropriating someone else's struggle, then we get parochial. Like we're not able to build bridges. But if we really recognize that your liberation is bound up in mine, while being respectful of the difference, while knowing the very specific histories we come from, but also looking at the world that we want to make together. Because I don't want a world where we all live in silos. I want a world where we really are all united. Yeah, I don't know if that anybody else did.
I love this question, so I'm burning. So thank you so much. Identity politics thing, right? Identity politics has to be talked about. So Amiri Baraka, one of the giants of the Black Radical tradition, who also was known, real well known in Newark, New Jersey. Say is unity through struggle. I think a lot of times when we think of solidarity, or too many times we think of solidarity, we think of sameness. That solidarity means sameness, that we gotta be the same. But solidarity doesn't mean sameness, it means struggle. One of the dangers, I think, of having some of the bad versions of identity politics, so identity politics is important. I think it allows us to describe a particular group of people who's catching hell, right? The house is on fire. Those who look like that, right, are by the closest to the fire. So it allows us to name the hell, right? But when we get caught in it, when we don't go beyond identity politics, then I think a revolutionary politic is not able to be reached. Because what happens is we presuppose so much and we assume so much. So we assume the sameness, right? So in other words, all black people don't have the same politics. In other words, all my skinfolk ain't my kinfolk, right? And so I think that we have to really be careful about bad versions of identity politics that presuppose a particular politic based simply on identity. That's another way to say that, is that I don't think that we need to have unity, solidarity, based off of simply identity. I think we've seen that. I think we have a black political class that has been dancing with the Democratic Party and has used bad versions of identity politics to tell black people to just simply vote for the Democratic Party, i.e. we have President Obama. And so why does this matter in student-based organizing? Because when we have some of our demands, they go something like this. Well, let's just add black people to the curriculum. As if that's going to make it black, right? Just add black faces to it. Let's just get more black professors. I'm with getting more black professors, but let's make sure they're black radical professors. I'm with adding more black people to the curriculum. Let's make sure it's off of the black radical tradition reading list. So it's not simply enough to just have an identity politic that stops there and gets caught in the thicket, but has to go through it. Fanon says this in Wretched of the Earth, talking about not getting caught in the pitfalls of national consciousness, but being able to recognize it but go through it. I think that's really important.
And actually, you made a really good point about whether we're talking about Palestinian ancestors or black ancestors, and I'm not sure if you were here for my presentation, but I showed a video called When I See You, I See Them, and Christian is right here. Wait, please. He's one of the founders of the videos, and obviously, you know, I mean, slavery is something very horrible. I don't think it's absolutely disgusting, and gotten out of it or paid reparations at all. And I think that what we met just by solidarity, what Palestinians and blacks have in common is, in terms of today, when you talk about how, former mayor Michael Nutter wanted to have a stop and frisk of when you see a black teen, you can just stop him and frisk him. Palestinians are stopped and frisked by Israeli soldiers all the time. And when, people were being tear gassed in Ferguson, Palestinians were just giving them advice on how to deal with, tear gas. So I think just within that solidarity, it's more of like respect. I don't think this, we're trying to overshadow your movement or your movement is overshadowing ours. They're kind of interconnected and we're moving together and moving forward.
Just real quick to the point about the ancestors, I'd like to say that it's important that in studying the Black radical tradition that we recognize Black people are human. Like, we are human and a part of the human process of liberation. We're part of the human process of, even the human process of the way that our history has propelled us into the epoch of modern day capitalism or imperialism and what have you. We are all a part of that process. And so when we acknowledge our ancestors in struggle, that's what they are, our ancestors in struggle. And they're not necessarily attached to an identity, but rather attached to a legacy of not giving in to oppression and standing against oppressive structures, standing against oppressors, and dying and fighting and going to jail and getting arrested, being harassed, and everything that our ancestors have gone through to give us this chance for our future. I think that when we acknowledge, at least in this space today, that's who we've been acknowledging, our ancestors in resistance, our ancestors in struggle.
Okay, what about you?
Hi, my name's Haley. I'm from New York. Thank you to everybody on this panel. This is one of the best, I think, at this conference and really gives me some clarity going forward. I work at the SUNY New Paltz, so I'm on a campus. Anyway, I just had a question. So I think that, it's I think really important. I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your name.
Wafat.
Wafat?
Wafat.
Wafat. Okay. What you were talking about in terms of obviously the historical, parallels, or even the experiential parallels and the continued parallels between, let's say, an issue like Palestine and Black liberation, or you could talk about Mexico and Black liberation. There are a lot of different struggles that experientially are connected, but there's also material connection, which I think that the brother here was talking about, in that if we divest from, let's say, G4S, which is actually connected not, in an abstract way we just experience, similar types of oppression, we actually have a system that is implicit in the prison industrial complex, the international global, arms industry, that's actually exporting oppression in different ways to different people and oppressing the same, groups in different ways. I think that's actually a basis for solidarity. So kind of based on that question, I'm curious what people, especially if you're on campus, have to say about sort of next steps. Like, especially it sounds like amazing things are happening at Temple in a million different ways, whether it's Fight for 15 or around the Black Studies Department, a number of things. Are there connections that are being made? Is there sort of a sense of what next steps would look like? Now that there's more momentum since Missouri around what campus struggle could look like.
Because we can't say something. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm the moderator.
I just like to say at Temple, the student organizations are really well connected. The student organizations who are fighting this fight are really well connected in solidarity with each other. Students for Justice in Palestine, 15 Now, and also a lot of the cultural orgs on campus have been working together to connect the struggle to the streets, connect the struggle to other students on the campus. And I think that moving forward, what we see this conference sort of becoming is almost like creating an agenda for us. And we've been talking about lots of things. So, Rose, did you want to talk about that? Okay, go ahead. All right, well, okay. So we've been talking about a lot of things, and it's kind of hard to say right now.
The philosophy class? Okay.
Okay, so we've been, we want to do teach-ins, we want to do more political education. We want to do book clubs and build survival programs around campus, especially with youth and around literacy and food. It's really, really important. And I know you from LA, it's really, really important to bring food. If you want to talk to people, if you want to engage people around the struggle, like me, it's really important to connect them to food. And not just bring food, but grow food, cook food together, eat food together. It's very, very important. So, and we've all like kind of discussed this with each other, and this is kind of us building our agenda for that. So.
Okay, so now like since there's a lot of questions, we're gonna be taking multiple questions. So like at once. Okay, so we'll take your question first.
Sure. So this is directed to you, Shar. I really connected with what you were saying about how working with people can be difficult because of hierarchies developing. From my experience as well, I've had that issue with sexism and ageism, and I was wondering, how do you correctly organize and delegate responsibilities without those hierarchies developing?
Okay, next hand. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the unity between different orgs and different cultures, but now I want to talk about more of like your own organization that you work with, like within it. So we're Cal Poly's BSU, and we just started, and it has our Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California. It's like less than 1% Black people on our campus. So we haven't had a Black student meeting in like 10 years, and so we just started back up. But we're having a little issue when it comes to different views in a sense. So we got a death threat on our campus, and we also had a bomb threat on our buses recently. And one of our students, she's very big on speaking. She's fantastic when it comes to like, I want this to be done, I'm gonna say something. But there's a lot of different views on how she presents herself or says things, and it's kind of hard, like, what do you do in a sense of bringing everybody's ideas in together and presenting them in a way where our president or the people are not like overwhelmed by it. Like every single Cal Poly Black student just bombards them with like demands. We already had solidarity demands, but it was only one Black student representing every Black student at Cal Poly, and it's like, what do you do in that sense?
Without actually bringing down the emotional impact that it has to have.
You in the back.
So I'm also a graduate student in seminary at Boston University, which the racism there is probably legendary. And the issue, I think the biggest issue that we have definitely on the undergrad and the graduate campus is that a lot of the professors of color are not radical. They have their own agenda. It's very political at BU. And specifically, we have a center for students of color on the undergrad campus, which is like maybe half the size of this room. And all of the students of color have to hold their meetings there. And it's basically like our space, but it's not a safe space. Like it's a space where white students can come in and feel like great, allies, and we don't want to offend anyone. And then also like we have, like for example, we have Black administrators and professors that are like bribing students and are kind of indoctrinating them to kind of go along with the university. And definitely I resonated with what, I don't remember who said this, but hijacking the movement. We had, so my dean at the seminary that I go to was just like appointed as the head of the board of student diversity at BU based on all of the progress that she's made, when really in reality she just had like all of the students of color like have our own events, and she just signed her name to them. But the way it's being told is that, oh, like this dean has been working so hard with the students, and they like erected this student advisement board on diversity that was called back in May, and then they didn't get an email until September, and it's just all a guise. And so I'm just trying to figure out, like, in terms of mobilizing our students of color, I know on the graduate campus, like, it's not common for the Latino students or the Palestinian students or the any other students working together with or rallying together, and we're trying to kind of break down that culture. But I guess just like what suggestions you might have to kind of chip away at that just heavily respectable kind of aura that surrounds this campus.
I'm gonna do it like 3 questions by 3 questions. I don't want to overwhelm y'all, so you guys answer the.
I think I want to start something like, people are talking about the sex and the age. I mean, doing the, we've been a lot of challenges to talk about sex and age and sexual orientation too. But we just, we practice a lot and talking. And we bring a lot of speakers in, to talk about the LGBTQ or talk about the gender. And then sometimes a year we do more than 1 workshop because we feel they still have an issue on it, and then we will do it again. And the age, I mean, I don't think so. The age, is a problem. But I want to talk more broadly about the age and the leadership and the group we're organizing, because when the sister here was talking about the unity, so it was solidarity. So I think it makes me think about the leadership unity or people unity, because what Ma was mentioned that in the China Revolution, it was he was on the point of believe people power, support people, rely to people, and then mobilize people. Because I think rely to the people are really important. Because sometimes I didn't see that. Sometimes it was only just leaders talking and leaders solidarity with other leaders, but it wasn't a lot about the people decision on them. So that's why I feel rely to the people are really important. That's why when we mobilize people, that it will be more powerful than leaders.
I just want to go over that about mobilizing people. This past December, the Temple proposed and announced their plans to build a multi-million-dollar stadium in the middle of North Philadelphia. Where? Right. And it's a problem. So it takes the students to advocate against the stadium because, and it's not just Temple. It's universities across Pennsylvania and across Philadelphia as a whole. And these large corporations and universities aren't understanding what they're doing to the communities whose lands that they're gentrifying and whose labors that they're exploiting. So it's important for us as students, and myself in 15 now, to work within the community together and mobilize and fight against things that just aren't right. You can't just wipe out 100-some homes and just think that people are just supposed to be okay with it. You have to question yourself, like, I really like to ask President Theobald if someone was to say, oh, I'm going to build a stadium in your backyard. It's things like that just you really have to take a second and just ponder on. It's just not right. So it definitely is important to mobilize and come together within your school, within your community, within your work, wherever you are. It's important because when you have an anointing over your life and you just shed light upon people, that's a calling. You just have to come together with other people and bounce that energy off of one another and make things happen and make change happen.
Just to speak to your question about how do you organize in an environment when you're so isolated. And so I went to University of Pennsylvania, which is like, it's where the ruling class goes for their education. When we occupied Wharton, the fraternities had a 1% party. And like, yeah, and we were like, when we were there, the students were protesting us. They were saying, get a job. And they were holding signs that said, get in my income bracket. Like, it was ridiculous. But I think the key, I think what changed was when, like, a movement like Occupy happened, a lot of people who were so isolated came out of the woodwork, because people want community. Like, if you create those community spaces where, like, we have a different way of doing things, we have a different politics, we have a different way of being students and understanding education, I think people will come, but you have to, it's really hard work, it's really isolating, you can't do it alone. So I think when you yourself start to change the campus culture, that's the beginning. But that's work that we have to do as students, and we also have to seize the historical moment that we're in and act on it. Like, there's Black Lives Matter happening. Like, you have to talk about that, you have to make it relevant. Yeah, so it's not easy, I've been there, but you're gonna do it, absolutely, because you're here.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I wanted to say. You guys, with you're starting your Black Student Union and being confused about how to sort of approach leadership mechanisms, I guess, I think that one thing you need to know is that you have to meet the people at your university where they are. You can't try to like replicate what's happening necessarily at other universities, because like you can't just try to turn up just because Mizzou turned up. Like, you have to meet them where they are and build with those people. Another thing you have to do in building with them, and I kind of wanted to speak to your question about sexism and just like hierarchy in general, is the same sort of like the same thing that we want, say redistribution of power. We have to replicate that in our organizing. We have to redistribute power in our organizing to the people who in the society would not have it. Because what's the sense of me coming into your organization saying that I have no power out in the regular world, and then I come in and I have no power here either? So a huge part of the way that we do that is you put those people in your leadership. You put women, you put trans people, you put gender non-conforming people in your leadership, you put youth in your leadership, you make sure that the people who are making decisions are the people who will be considered the least of the least. And not just based on identity, but based on the fact that they are the people, you entrust them to look out for the best interests of the group. You have to build that trust. It's not something that happens overnight. But also putting those people in those positions of leadership ensures that they're going to continue in the movement. It gives them a stake in it. It gives them a future in it. And then lastly, I wanted to say that it's really important to recognize your skills, the skills that are among you. Everybody has them. We didn't, we come with talents, you know what I'm saying? And we didn't make it to college based off the fact that we didn't have any skills. So you recognize, it might be that the girl who talks the loudest, her skill might not be speaking, right? And her skill might be, she's a really great, organizer, or she can get students. She can go and rally around students. Her skill might not be talking to the president, but talking to individual students and mobilizing them, because students might relate to her better than somebody like the president or the provost. So I think that once you guys get to know each other, it's really important. You have to have those sessions. You gotta sit down with each other, have lunch. You gotta go, to a concert, do something together. You have to educate each other and yourselves together. So study groups and philosophy circles and book clubs, all of that stuff is really important, and that will ground you ideologically because you're going to be learning together, but also it'll make you guys friends, and so that you can trust each other and build and start to get to know what your skills are, and then you can figure out how to use those skills the most effectively. Another thing is also being super consistent when whenever there is an incident of discrimination that happens among you, you must be consistent with that, and you cannot. That will destroy everything you build if you allow discrimination or whatever it is, gender discrimination or any issue of conduct to like build distrust in your organization, because you have to think about COINTELPRO and the way that distrust can destabilize an entire movement. Building that trust is extremely important. And when stuff goes down and people do stuff wrong, you have to acknowledge it, evaluate it, and figure out a way to make it right and move on. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to build a movement. We're just going to have, the people who we put in leadership basically out there to get attacked and everything bad happen to them when they're already being attacked. Because as if we're saying that we need to put women in leadership, we also have to say that we have to protect those leaders as well through the way that we organize, the way that we deal with conduct and miscommunications and all of those types of things. So.
Other questions? Okay, Christian, Johanna, and
One of us.
It's both of you guys? Okay, both of you guys. So, Christian.
First, I just wanted to say thank you all for all the work that you do. It's really inspiring to hear about it. And for me, as somebody who just graduated from college, I'm in a weird position of no longer being tied to students and organizations and not wanting to go into like the NGOization of the movement. So I'm just trying to think through a lot of stuff on my own. But for the comrades representing international struggles, practically, how do we learn or stay up to date with what you're doing in solidarity with us? And how do we show that? Because I'd like to show that to more Black people, that people around the world are protesting for us. But more broadly, can we imagine what it looks like to exchange information between resistance movements across borders, to create our own media, to create our own revolutionary propaganda? What does that look like? How do we exchange information and make connections with the infrastructure that we have?
Yeah, I think this was an amazing panel in part because you guys are all rooted in struggle. And when you're rooted in struggle, the lessons of struggle emerge and how power works. And it crystallizes that. So this was really amazing for me to just listen to. So I have a question and a comment about this unity issue. I was just very touched, Meghna, by your story of India that nobody knows. I mean, I didn't know. And it just shows the possibility of anti-Black or no pro-Black or Black Lives Matter protests beyond the African American community that we think doesn't ever happen. All we know about India is that there's racism in India, but there's a counter movement to that we need to hear more about. And I think that one of the best ways to establish unity is by reading and learning and studying other people's oppression. Not just Indians reading Malcolm, but African Americans and Latinos have to read about the struggle in India and in Palestine. That's our responsibility because they use the same systems of oppression in India, in Palestine, in the United States, and Latin America. And then I just have a question for Wei because I hadn't heard of this incredible organizing. I'm wondering what the racial composition of the high school was, where the high school was, and were you able to get the different racial groups to talk to each other? Because ultimately that's what this issue of unity is about.
And you too.
Okay, so I come from this very multicultural background, and for me it's always been about unity, bringing people together, all of this stuff. But then again, there's issues like the girl that was sitting up there, and she's talking about when you invite everybody, there's a possibility it gets hijacked or there's no more a safe space. And the thing is, there's always this mistrust, especially, I've noticed that a lot in certain African American communities, because I'm new to the African American community. I really am, because I came from Ethiopia, and it's like totally different, Africa and coming over here, but we are very similar, and we don't realize it, you know? And so my question is about how can we trust, yet, you know, because I just see so much distrust, and then that doesn't allow for the unity that is possible, you know, and especially when there's people who are so ignorant, but they really want to try. And perhaps it's not genuine, perhaps it is genuine, but you don't know until they actually try it out, you know? And so how can I actually get people on board to trust one another and bring them together and unify them? Our group, actually.
This question kind of goes for like, it kind of connects all of these things. But like we're new Black Student Union, like they were saying, and I just happen to feel like I'm in this position of like, I don't know how I got here, but I just feel like God put me in the position that I am. So my question mainly is like, when you get here and when you're like thrown into this situations, you guys all talked about your struggles, but I didn't hear not one of you say ever that you felt like you were in a position and you were lost, or like you kind of were confused of what to do, but it was mostly like, how do I get people to do this, how do I get people to do that, how do I get everyone together, but sometimes it's like inside of you you're lost and you don't really understand like where to go inside of you. So kind of like, have you ever had a situation where you're like, whoa, like I need to step back and kind of evaluate myself, and how did you get through that and like connect it with the people around you?
Okay, so if you guys want to answer this quickly, because the next panel starts at 12:45. So yeah, if you guys, someone go ahead. Go ahead. Answer.
Only just for one thing, you mentioned in student organizations how do you trust one another, and what if there's maybe an iffy member, or was it that sort of it?
The thing is, people already believe there's an iffy member if somebody else who isn't, I guess, of the same identity.
Is it white people?
Right.
We have to be clear. If it's white people, we do, because if it's white people, I think we do need to be clear about how we engage white allies. But if it's other people of color and the problem within the context of like this whole anti-blackness and like being worried that other people of color are going to co-opt the black struggle to bring light to their struggle and abandon Black people, it's that we have to be clear about that, because those are two different issues, and I think we need to talk about them in a way that's constructive, because it's a question of our humanity. It's a question of whether or not we are able to see the humanity of others, and if others are able to see the humanity of us. And that's why there's that distrust there, because there's so much that's been stripped from us or negated or distorted. So I think that we need to just be clear.
Really quickly, we actually had a white member in Students for Justice in Palestine, and she mentioned to us that we had to speak to Zionist organizations. So that's the equivalent of just like telling Black solidarity groups they have to meet with white supremacists and meet the white supremacist demands.
Yeah, that's
so at first a lot of members were really uncomfortable with that, and we would like argue with her respectively, and what ended up happening is she actually went to Palestine on her own, and she ended up doing a whole 360, and she never brought that up again. And so I think it would be unfair for us to have kicked her out. You get it? We like talked to her respectively, and she actually ended up going and learning on her own. So it's kind of just being like respectful, because she, like you said, she's ignorant, not like racist. She just didn't have that knowledge, and we kind of opened it up for her, and she did the rest. So I think it's giving people a chance who are really genuine.
Yeah, who are genuine. Because they're not like, there's infiltrators, there's like people who will be toxic to the organization that should not be. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, but that's just for the genuine ones. And then I know we had something to say, right? Yeah.
I actually wanted him to say something, because he said something about the trusting issue, and that's where it came up.
Okay.
Can you repeat your question again? Sorry.
I'm just wondering what the racial composition of the high school was, and whether you were able to bring the different racial groups together in any way.
So, Salford High School was, about 15% of Asian. and lots of the majority are Black American. And so when something happened, when the violent incident happened in the school, there was not a student group, any student group was involved in the school to helping us. But there were a couple, my classmate was, really like supporting, like, we got you, like, we got your back. Well, even though there was just one sentence, but there was really warm. There was really huge support for myself to continue doing stuff in the school. Because I got beat up after organizing too, people didn't know that. And then, but there's a lot of support from the outside of the school, which the Philadelphia Student Union doing the workout was a huge support for us. They came out rally and spoke for us. They came out to marching with us. They went to SLC protest with us. And there was, bring a lot of, better relationship to the people. Yeah, I trust that. It's just not just, Black and Asian problem. It's about the school people did not take responsibility. Yeah.
I just want to speak to the person who said that they're no longer a student. I'm also no longer a student. I have an MA in history, which is great in this economy. I'm an AmeriCorps worker. I'm making less than minimum wage. I'm really struggling, but also just ideologically, it's so hard to stay a leftist and to stay an organizer when you're outside of college because there's just so much else that you have to do. You have to maintain yourself, you have to eat. I think this is advice that Bill Fletcher gave me a few years ago, and he said you have to join an organization. And I don't think there's any other substitute. When you're on your own outside of college, you have to join. I'm part of Black Radical Organizing Committee, and that has given me so much ideological clarity, and it's given me a political home for the last few months, and it sustains me, and it's helped me continue my engagement as a leftist, and I just think that's a really important point. And also your point about international communication, I think it is really hard because I don't know that many news, there's like Democracy Now!, but I think we ourselves, when we can, we have to go there, and I think the diaspora is so important, like the Palestinian diaspora. If we're able to go and build bridges between the two places, we have to come back and share and tell that story, and so I think we just have to be really vocal, and we have to be participating in spaces like this, we have to be drawing connections, and we have to be there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say was about the revolutionary propaganda and media communication. I really think that this is where social media helps us the most. And not just social media, but just the internet in general. And I think that it's really, really, really important that we tell our own narratives. We have to write our own stories and put it out there for everybody to see. We have to make sure that we're being journalists alongside of all the other stuff that we're doing. And we have to be using our creative for the revolution. So everybody's creative, whatever y'all do, y'all sculpt, knit, whatever it is, y'all knit whatever you want that reveals what our struggle is. You do what you communicate in the best way and you using every communication tool that we have. And I think that that's what will create more of a dialogue is if we're sharing those, not just information through the internet, but also transmitting it through our revolutionary culture.
Any more comments?
Can I just say, I'm very thankful for all the people that are involved in organizing this conference to further my own political education, because that needs to happen. And I'm also very thankful for Kashar and Wolfat for their organizations led to my transition in understanding, this radical tradition during a period in my life where I thought, I was liberal, but what does liberal mean? And then, what is a radical and, what is necessary. So yeah, thank you very much for yeah, the work and yeah.
Okay, I guess, are we doing another question?
Well, you're gonna wrap it up, I just wanna.
Alright, yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna, go ahead.
Are you sure, okay, you sure, is it?
It's important, but it's not that.
Any other pressing issues? Yeah, Billy?
Just real quick, y'all were amazing. There's some of the best Philly groups are represented on this panel right here. Let's just all get together afterwards, you know?
Can I say something? So, you know, I struggled a lot in academia, and especially as somebody who really aspires to go back to academia, to tell the narrative and story of my own community. Like, you know, I don't think that academia is no longer a space for a lot of oppressed communities. And I've been thinking a lot about how that the academia that exists today was built on a model that a Muslim woman in Morocco came up with in 856. Right? So like thinking back to that and thinking about the fact that academia was literally built by us, but is no longer ours. And you know, like you guys have given so much insight to it. I really appreciated that. So